I finished the second and third rows of stone blocks. As I began the fourth row, I heard Fortunato begin to shake the chains that held him to the wall. He was trying to pull them out of the granite wall. I smiled to myself and stopped working so that I could better enjoy listening to the noise. After a few minutes, he stopped. I finished the fifth, the sixth, and the seventh rows of stones. The wall I was building in the doorway was now almost up to my shoulders. Suddenly, loud screams burst from the throat of the chained man. For a moment, I worried. What if someone heard him? Then I placed my hand on the solid rock of the walls and felt safe.
Welcome back to Nightly Noir, the only channel where the fall season is colored in black and white. October is upon us, and with it comes all the cozy autumn seasonal things we love, like carving pumpkins, hay rides, and of course, watching scary movies. With that being said, on tonight's episode, we're going to be looking at a very specific form of noir content, a type of noir that fits right in with the October season. Tonight, we're looking into the Gothic Noir subgenre. Gothic fiction got its start in literature back in the late 18th century. Many English writers such as Horace Walpole, Anne Radcliffe, and Matthew Lewis began writing novels depicting remote places and long-abandoned medieval castles. This was the beginning of what would come to be known as the Gothic genre. The name comes from the incredible architecture from the Middle Ages, which just so happens to have the same name. It didn't take long for this type of writing to become the dominant and preferred style throughout Europe. It was later refined by other authors such as Charles Dickens and the Brontë sisters. Gothic novels were considered both a genre and a style, much like noir is. These stories often featured a young woman trapped in a cold, dark, old castle or mansion, or in some cases a cold, dark marriage, or even both. These women were the subject of countless threats through ancient prophecies, strange relatives with ominous intentions, like my Uncle Ted, and somewhat supernatural entities that cause odd sounds to occur at night, like my Uncle Ted when he eats too many beans before bed. Gothic stories often retold the oddities from the past, transformed romance into terror, and mixed mystery with macabre imagery. These novels were also what brought on the first proper horror novel, which is credited to Mary Shelley's Frankenstein in 1818. This novel was also counted as the first science fiction novel. Later on down the line, the Gothic style and genre traveled to other parts of the world, including America, and found new popularity through several different writers, one of which is my favorite, Edgar Allan Poe. Not only was he terrifying his readers in several of his works like The Fall of the House of Usher and The Cask of Amontillado, but he also was one of the first writers to invent what is considered the American detective, with his character C. Auguste Dupin from The Murders in the Rue Morgue. This character would later go on to inspire Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes. There is even a small nod to Poe in the 1951 noir film, The Man with a Cloak. I could do an entire video on Poe, though he wouldn't really fit nicely in our noir discussions. However, he is credited with pretty much inventing the detective crime novel, which is really cool. It's details like this that make me appreciate researching these topics that much more. When it comes to film, the Gothic literary genre was prominent in projects related to early German Expressionism, which was a film movement around 1919 and stuck around until about 1933. It was known for distorted, exaggerated set pieces, as well as costumes and lighting, as a way to translate internal conflicts and psychological states. Many of the subject matter was centered around post-World War I anxieties from that era. Though the movement was short-lived, many of its techniques and style had a large impact on horror, Gothic, and noir. Some notable projects from this period were Robert Wine's The Cabinet of Caligari from 1919 and F.W. Murnau's Nosferatu in 1922.
Wait! If that was you on the phone and you on the bus, then who was flickering the lights? Nosferatu!
Not too long after this, Hollywood began to pump out many Gothic horror films, especially Universal Studios. They were the studio for horror with films such as Dracula in 1931, Frankenstein in 1931, The Mummy in 1932, and The Invisible Man in 1933. Many of what we now call Universal monsters is due in large part to this studio. Now it's time to answer the question, when exactly did the Gothic genre get combined with noir? Surprisingly, it came before the big noir boom of the 1950s. It was a film that reaffirmed a strong career in filmmaking and directing. The film in question was 1940's Rebecca. It was a smash hit, and looking into the people responsible for it should come as no surprise as to why. The film was directed by a young Alfred Hitchcock, which was his first American film after finding moderate success in filmmaking in Europe. David O. Selznick produced the film, and it was adapted from Daphne du Maurier's novel of the same name. It won the Academy Award for Best Picture in 1940, and instantly became the quintessential source of romantic suspense on screen. The film blends emotional turmoil of the Gothic variety with the criminal mystery style of noir. The film vaguely hints at a potential supernatural component, but by the end, you find that the evil forces were all human, which also favors more noir elements. The movie stars Joan Fontaine as the unworldly heroine who marries an insanely rich man, played by Laurence Olivier. After only a few days of acquaintanceship, she is spirited away to his large estate and left isolated. Despite the modern setting, the atmosphere is undoubtedly still Gothic. The estate seems to possibly be haunted by her husband's first wife, who died recently from mysterious circumstances. With a classic Gothic premise that slowly transforms into more of a psychological murder mystery, Hitchcock's masterful directorial technique created the first ever Gothic noir film. Once this movie was made, many people tried to recreate it in some form in the years after its release. Many films after Rebecca used elements of the Gothic style either through the physical setting, such as films like Dark Waters and The Amazing Mr. X, their historical periods, like in The Lodger and Hangover Square, or just used both, like in The Spiral Staircase. These changing trends inevitably cause a role reversal in terms of gender regarding typical noir fiction. For example, Gothic noir tends to not include many femme fatales, replacing it with female naivete. The evil and mysterious components are then transferred to the male role, sometimes called the homme fatale. Sometimes the male becomes just a misunderstood hero in some contexts as well. This mixture of romance and violence seemed to strike a chord, especially with female audiences, which is why Gothic noir experienced its height of popularity during and right after World War II, since many men had been shipped off to fight, leaving women the only ones left to fill theater seats. It seems they just couldn't get enough of vampires, much like the female stars in the films themselves. Some people classify horror noir as its own category, however, Gothic noir is seen in many of those films too. Aside from actual supernatural elements, the Gothic style is abundant in this area of cinema. For example, Robert Wise's The Body Snatcher features moonlit graveyards surrounded by dark shadows, corpses appearing in the middle of the night, and a phantom-like figure taking control of a horse and carriage during a thunderstorm. This film was based on a short story by Robert Lewis, the writer of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. The Body Snatcher is set in the Victorian era, adding elements of romanticism and isolation to a story about grave robbers supplying a local medical school with cadavers. The Victorian period alone is enough to evoke the classic Gothic style, as many Gothic stories are centered around this time. Regardless of the hints of potential supernatural elements by the end of the film, The Body Snatcher is ultimately a crime film wrapped in a Gothic veneer. Another film by the name of The Leopard Man has a similar structure. It was made in 1943 and directed by Jacques Tourneur. The title makes you think it's going to be a monster movie about a killer cat. On the contrary, we see that the titular Leopard Man is no more than a human with a desire for revenge. Sounds a lot like an actual cat, or at least mine when they don't get fed in time. Again, no paranormal or supernatural stuff, just humans doing human things. Though the film is set in an exotic place filled with Native American traditions, the primary place where most of the film is set in is in a nightclub that would not be out of place in your typical noir. The Gothic noir subgenre is somewhat paradoxical in nature. It adds a dark beauty to a genre known for its grittiness and filth. It mixes in exotic fantasy in a style often rich in realism. It exhibits naive and innocent characters, a stark departure from the cynicism of noir. The more noir-like elements come from its isolation and alienation of its characters, which rather than lead to desperation and shame, tends toward an escalation of terror that is wonderful to behold. But there you have it, a noir subgenre full of frights and terror. These types of films should be perfect to get you in the mood this spooky season. Looks like that's all I got for this episode. Hope you enjoyed this dive into the Gothic Noir style. Videos should start coming back at a more consistent pace, so I hope you look forward to that. This has been Nightly Noir, and have a good night.